This is Donna with More Than Review, and we are live in Cincinnati, Ohio at Lori Foster's Reader and Author Get-Together. And I am just so excited. I have read the White Knight series by Julie Moffett, and so get to meet her in real life was very exciting. And for those of you, if any of you for my work happen to be watching, we are like geek girls, so you're gonna love this series, both the Lexi Carmichael series and then the White Knight series. So I'll let you tell a little bit about both the Lexi Carmichael series and the new one. So.
Okay. Well, as she said, I write about geek girls, and mostly I started out because I felt at the time, that girls in the tech field were not well represented in fiction, and I couldn't read anybody like the kinds of things I did or did the kinds of things I did. But when I first wrote the book, I was actually with a New York publisher at the time, and I submitted the book, and my editor liked the book, but my editor came back and said, you know what, the management thinks that nobody wants to read about a female hacker. Girls in tech, nobody's interested. No one's going to buy this. And so then my agent shopped at a couple other places, and everyone's like, ew, a girl in IT, who wants that? And so it kind of sat in the proverbial drawer for about 7 years until Harlequin had their first digital press line, Carina Press, come out, and they were like, well, we're looking for heroines out of the box. And I thought, well, that's really what I got. So I submitted it, and they joke it is the fastest acquisition by Carina, they say, ever, because it was like less than 24 hours from submission to acceptance. And then 13 books later, I'm thinking that maybe people do want to read about a girl in IT. So the books are humorous, and they're a girl who works in IT at the NSA. That's how it starts out. And then she, gets mixed up in international intrigue with spies and hot secret agents and thriller, and so she ends up saving the day always with her brain. So I just thought it was a good thing, and so it was very popular among younger people. So I decided to do a spin-off of the series, so for even younger girls, high schoolers, and that's where the White Knight series was born. So the first book in the series came out in December.
Yes. And I am not typically a fan of young adult, I'll be honest, but you just get so wrapped up in the character, and you feel like she's the underdog, and you just want her to win kind of overcome. And I think you can just relate to all the different characters within the book, and especially some of the high school scenes.
Right.
I feel like everyone's lived through one of those.
Yeah.
But I don't want to ever spoil stuff, and so writing the review is very hard, because I loved one scene where you'll see some Hello Kitty stuff, and I was like, I almost brought some Hello Kitty with me. But it was, it's just you add a lot of humor.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that's hard, because, sometimes in humor we're using tone inflection or facial expression. So is it hard to put it in a book?
Humor is really hard to write. It's super hard, because what you think is really funny, someone's going to go like, that was not funny at all. So you try to write humor through relatable experiences. People are awkward. We're all awkward at some point or another. So we all try to draw on that kind of awkwardness. Or somebody who does these things that are awkward or funny, or sometimes I write things that happen to myself. Sometimes I write things that have happened to my friends, and sometimes I just make it up, as it goes along. But humor is hard, but I try to make it seamless, as seamless as possible.
It was very, very good. And we do want to say hi. I said Dorothy is saying hello.
Hi, Dorothy.
And Sonia and Greta, hello.
Hi.
You guys would love these books. I'm telling you. Also the girls that code, that would be her great audience. So definitely want to say, go out and get those. They're very good, no matter what age you are. So let's ask you some questions. So your personal life seems as exciting as what you write about. So I was wondering, do you pull from your own experiences?
I do. So I actually wrote my first story in the second grade. So and when the fourth grade, we had those memory books in the old days where you would, they had actually, if you wanted to be as a girl, you had 4 boxes. You had nurse, teacher, mother, and stewardess. Those were the 4 options. And then there was one little box that said other, and I checked the other very carefully, and I wrote author. Oh. So I always knew I wanted to be an author. But of course, I went to school. I studied Russian language and political science. And when I was a sophomore in college, I was actually recruited by the CIA because they were looking for Russian language majors. So I thought I was going to join the CIA. I went through all 4 years of college with a handler who was checking in with me every semester to see how my grades were going, how things were going. And then I started graduate school in Washington, D.C., so I could be near the CIA. And I went in for all my interviews and medicals and everything like that. And then one of my professors at Georgetown recommended me for an internship in what at the time was Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which was a radio station that broadcast news and information to behind the Iron Curtain at the time. So I'm dating myself. But and so I was offered an internship in Munich, and the year before I went, it was bombed by Carlos the terrorist, so there was all that stuff going on. But I went there and I loved it. It was like international journalism, which I just absolutely loved. And so after all that time preparing for the CIA, I ended up getting a job at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and doing international journalism instead of CIA stuff. So yeah, and so that's kind of my background. And then I actually spent a year at the University of Warsaw studying Polish language, and then I worked as a journalist for many years, and then kind of stayed home with when I had babies, and then I started really getting into writing then. I really didn't have more time, but somehow I just couldn't be still. My mind was never still. So.
Wow. So how many people can say they were recruited by the CIA? I think that's absolutely amazing. So,
was it fun?
So I was gonna, my husband and I are huge fans of The Big Bang Theory, and literally one of my questions is, would you recommend Lexi and White Nights to fans of The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, sure.
And then your booth yesterday, she had a cutout of Sheldon.
He's still over there. He's still over there if you want to go get
So we definitely got pictures of him yesterday, so you'll see that posted. But I thought, just that seems to be a very popular right now. So do you have any Sheldon type characters coming?
Well, I think Lexi and I'll be honest with you, I saw the Big Bang Theory for the first time last year. Like, I'd heard of it, but I'd never actually seen a whole episode of the show. So I finally sat down to watch the show, and of course I fell in love with Sheldon right away. I was like, oh my God. Actually, I liked them all the characters I just fell in love with, because that's kind of my tribe anyway. But, my whole family are geeks. That's what really, when I wrote the first back in the 90s is when I wrote the first book, but of course it didn't get published until 2010 because it was in the drawer. But my whole family are geeks. Like, I have, geophysicists. My nephew works at Google, so he was the kid that is very Sheldon-like, very brilliant, and so I often go to him when I'm like, oh, I wrote myself into this tech corner, can you help me out, And there's one really famous scene in No Test for the Wicked that he actually wrote me out of. A lot of fans actually asked me about that. How did you think of that? I'm like, it wasn't me. It was my nephew from Google that figured out how to get her out of that, And they're like, one fan even said, did you really, you really can do that? And I'm like, yeah, you really can. Anyway, so I love all those characters, and those characters are like family to me because my family's like that. So it's really easy. Like, I'm the least geeky in my family. Math was hard for me. Where all my other families like, oh yeah, they do everything in their heads and stuff, and I'm like, I'm still figuring it out on the paper. But because I am able to draw on all of that material, it's so fun to write about geeks. So it's just.
So do you have a lot of stories still to come?
Oh, I have a lot of stories. Yeah. So I have so my series right now, Lexi Carmichael series. I'm on writing book 11. Or 12. Actually, I'm writing book 12. If you count the novella, it makes 12 in the series. I'm contracted for 2 more. So the next one, No Stone Unturned, is coming out in January. Then I'm contracted for 1 more, and then we'll probably possibly go to contracts for some more. Which at the time I was thinking, yeah, nobody wants to read about IT, and I'm already like on book 13. I'm like, yeah, I think people do. And then I started the spin-off series and so I have the first book is White Nights, and the second book, Night Moves, is coming out probably in the end of October, November. And then the next one hopefully in the spring.
Yeah. So we hope to eventually find out about her dad.
Yeah, that's right. Eventually.
So you've shared a lot about yourself. So I was one of my questions is anything that you think that readers would be. No, that readers would be surprised to know about you.
Oh, let's see.
Other than recruited by the CIA, that's pretty surprising.
I actually did work on a CIA operation. So I'll be honest. Well, it was. I don't know exactly if it was CIA or not, but I think it was. But so when I was a graduate student in the University of Warsaw, there was 8 American students only at the University of Warsaw. And at the time, it was in the late 80s, so the solidarity movement in Poland was very much underway, and they were trying to, you know, overthrow or get rid of communism or whatever and have free speech. Well, the word got around from somebody that I had worked at Radio Free Europe as an intern there, and that was before I went to Poland. So the people from Solidarity found me and said, can you carry these documents out to the West, because they needed to get them out. And so, of course, me being, okay, sure, no problem. But, you know, if I would have been caught with those, that would have been jail or maybe execution. I don't know, treason, whatever. But being like, you know, 21, I was like, sure, no problem. So I actually carried smuggled documents out. So I would take the train from Warsaw to East Berlin. I would get out at East Berlin and take the metro to the East Berlin metro stop. Then I would walk across the no man's zone where, you know, it used to be Berlin, and it was just empty buildings with snipers on the roof, and I'd be the only person like walking down this, you know, the like this papers going, you know, down the streets. And then I would go to the East Berlin checkpoint, then I would go to the West Berlin checkpoint, then I would go in, and right across the street from Checkpoint Charlie was a McDonald's, and I would meet somebody there and hand off the papers. And so I did that several times until one time, and it was a night train, so I'd get on the train late at night, and when I wake up, I'd be in East Berlin. And one time I took papers and I was in a hurry, so I just shoved them in a record album, because at those days it's still vinyl. And the train stopped in some place in East Berlin, and they were taking everybody off the train and checking everybody really carefully for stuff, and I just not carefully hid those papers. And there was this I was in a room by myself with this big East German woman, and she was looking through like my underwear, you know, she was taking everything out. I'm like, I'm dead. I'm in East Berlin in some place I never saw before. I'm gonna be, you know. And so she came to the record album where I had the papers, and it just happened to be a singer called Alla Pugacheva, who at the time was super popular. And so she was like, oh, you like Alla Pugacheva? And I took the album from her. I'm like, oh yeah, see, this song, that's my favorite song right here, you know. And we were talking about it, and then I just put the album on the on the side, and then she went through the rest of my stuff. And after that, after I went across, I said, I'm done. Like, I'm done. That was just way too scary for me. I'm not doing any more smuggling papers. So that was the end of my story for, you know.
So you can write from that fear.
I can write from that fear. I can write about, you know, stuff that goes like that. So yeah, so that was like my, you know, my thing about doing that. So.
Wow. So my last question, so for readers and for authors at an event like this, what's some advice you would give them for what to do and how to get the most out of an event?
I think just be friendly. Like, don't be, I mean, a lot of people are introverts here, so it's like, how does an introvert meet an introvert? So it's like, you know, it's like people sitting next to each other but not really saying anything but wanting to. But the best thing about this place is that people are talking about books, so it's so easy just to jump in and like, oh, I read that too, you know, that scene was great, you know. And anywhere you walk around these events, you hear people talking books. So for book nerds, it's like heaven, because it's for the first time ever, it's just really easy to enter a conversation without being awkward.
Yeah, so I agree. Everybody's been so gracious. I've just been amazed at, you know, even just having conversations with other readers and sharing our favorite authors. Before we stop Facebook Live, I just highly want to recommend her books. I mean, whether you have
I pay her to text in the mail, I swear.
Whether you have young adults, and I'll tell you, for someone who I don't really care for young A, this was just a YA. Anyway, it's early, no, but for YA, we just absolutely, I just loved it. I mean, you just wrap yourself into the characters, and you don't care how old they are, you know, and I think everyone can kind of relate to that time in their life, and, you know, I wish I was her. We want to be Lexi and the
I know, right, you
too. But thank you guys, and we'll just have a short post on the blog later this week.
Bye, thanks.